Welcome, everyone. It's the Sit Down with Slick Vic. I got a guest today. I believe he's all the way in Chi-Town. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
I'm in Los Angeles right now.
Oh, okay. Are you visiting LA or did you move out there? I know you were in Chicago.
I'm moving over here. So
okay.
You're catching me at like a transitional time in my career and life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense because, ladies and gentlemen, he is an actor, comedian. Nguyen, thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Victor. This is going to be fun.
Perfect. Well, for those of us who are not too, I know a little bit about you, but not as much as I would like. So tell us a little bit about kind of your background, where you grew up.
Born and raised in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. To a couple of refugee immigrant parents. A lot of us out there from Vietnam. And I spent my formative years out there. Then I moved around the country pursuing higher education. So I lived in Seattle, Boise, lived in Houston for a little while where Victor is. Chicago for the past 11 years, and now I'm starting to move to Los Angeles, as I mentioned. Primarily now I'm an actor, but I've done a lot of sketch and improv comedy in the last 10 years in the Chicago area, where it's the mecca of that type of comedy, and so it would have been a huge miss for me if I did not expose myself to it, you know what I mean? So it was a really good time in my life.
So before we get to that, what were some of the things you were interested in when you were growing up?
Growing up, I spent so much time outside playing. Growing up in that area of the country, it's got to be one of the best things that ever happened to me because it's beautiful outside. People really love and respect nature out there. You hear about Seattle and people say, "Oh, it's rainy and wet and cold all the time," but that's only a few months out of the year, and the rest of the time it's beautiful. And even when it is a little bit wet, I love it, man. I miss it every day. But growing up, we used to spend a lot of time camping, hiking in the mountains, fishing. I'm not a huge fisherman, but members of my family are, and they really love doing it. And, just doing that type of thing, communing with nature. So
more of an outdoorsman.
Yeah. And now it's not so much, but now that I'm back on the West Coast, I think I'll be able to explore a little bit more. Chicago is kind of like an urban jungle, man. It's like I went there for school, for grad school, and for about 4 years there, my area of exposure was 5 square blocks between our condo and the school, and it was like either the school, the library, or sleeping at home. Those were my places for about 3 years. I got 2 master's degrees in Chicago. So
okay, was acting something that you always wanted to do when you were younger, or was this something?
Yeah, I was first exposed to it in high school. I did some theater stuff there, and then in college, I also studied drama at the University of Washington along with business. So I was like 2 tracks. But when it came time to decide what I would do with my life, I chose business because, I'm the oldest son of 2, like I mentioned before, refugee immigrant parents. And it was like way out of my imagination to even think about pursuing acting as a career. So right. I went the more serious route, and so I finished in marketing, and then I worked in marketing for about 8 years, and then that's when I moved to Chicago, and instead of going right to acting, I thought for some reason it'd be a good idea to just get 2 more business degrees. So that's what I did. I got an MBA and a master's of finance. But somewhere along that journey, I rediscovered that love for performing and the stage and acting and all of that. And about 5 years ago, I just quit my corporate job and went all in on acting full time. And it's been an incredible journey ever since then.
Now, let me ask you this. How much of your parents' influence was the initial wariness of pursuing acting? Or was that just you deciding?
You know what? That's a good question because my parents have always been so supportive of me and my choices. I feel like my decision to pursue business instead of acting that at that part of my life was mostly me. It wasn't my parents telling me you have to do this or you have to do that. It was just this sense of responsibility I felt within myself. You know, I have three younger brothers at that time, and I wanted to be able to be the brother who did something and was able to pull the family out of, you know, we weren't exactly middle class back then. So it was like up to me. I had decided, and it wasn't anyone who pushed me to it. That's funny. Yeah.
So you had no pressure, but it still was something that came because of the decision was still based on your family, right? Because you wanted to provide for them.
Exactly, and that's how it was in school growing up too. In high school and middle school, all the way through elementary school, I had this mentality of being the best academically. You know, we didn't have money for sports or very many extracurricular activities. So I spent a lot of my time reading and being studious, doing homework and just being as good as possible as I could be in that realm.
Okay, interesting. So we make the decision we're gonna do business. While you were pursuing that, you mentioned you got involved in college with the fine arts. Then you went to Chicago to get your graduate studies, right? Is it Loyola? Loyola, is that where you went?
Loyola, that's right, Loyola Chicago. Actually, they've been in the news recently. They were in the Sweet 16, I think.
Yeah, they made a nice little run.
Yeah, in the men's tournament. So
were they big into? I mean, because I remember them a couple years ago made a big run as well. But when you were going with their program, was that pretty good? Their sports program.
The one sport that I remember them excelling at was men's volleyball.
Oh, okay.
At some point, they became national champions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, around 2015, I think, or something like that. Someone would have to check Google to fact check me, but I believe. And they don't have a football team. They're not a big school. It's a small Jesuit school. So the sports that they do have are precious.
So you mentioned you weren't moving around exploring the city too much, I guess, because you're saying most of your time was spent between your condo and school, exactly. Right? The library.
I was so serious. I was spending at least 8 hours a day in the library because the stuff I was studying was pretty intense. So it was like high finance and things like that. I don't even talk about it anymore because it's so far removed from my life now. But that's what I did, and it fed my mind in a very amazing way. I just felt like I was curious about it every day. And in my life now, I find that same curiosity in the arts. So it's pretty interesting trend.
Oh, yeah, no, I can only imagine, man. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. The finance and the logistics of companies and how they spend their money and looking at trends and all that, you know?
Yeah, but it all boils down to attention to detail, but at the same time keeping in mind like the bigger picture. Same thing goes with the entertainment industry. As an actor, there's very small things that you can focus in on, but yes, you also have to realize what your part in the bigger production is. Even on a short film or stage show, it's kind of like you're a piece in the whole thing. And if you know how the entire machine works, that makes what you do in your role much more important.
Now, when you were at Loyola, was there any participation in theater?
Yeah, so I made some money on the side acting, just because it was easy for me to audition and get roles. Knock on wood, so I made some money doing that, and the schedule it's so free. I mean, you book something, and if you have time, you can do it. And if you don't have time, you don't do it. It's not like a normal 9 to 5 or even a serving job at a restaurant somewhere where you're kind of locked into the schedule. It's kind of ad hoc how those projects go. And I was really attracted to that. So when I was, in Chicago, I did some short films. I worked on some TV shows and a feature film. So back then.
Okay, so even though you were focused on the business degree, you still had to scratch that itch, right?
It's funny. I mean, you still have to do it. I never thought I would, when I was in school, I never thought I would make that transition to full time. I always was in the realm of something I did with my free time, or as a hobby, or as something to help me appreciate the arts, rather than, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm choosing to do this. This is me as my career. I'm going. And so, but when I made that switch to allow myself to be like, it doesn't have to be a hobby. It doesn't have to be just for fun. Then things kind of switched for me. Pretty amazing.
So I'm assuming when you're landing these roles, right, you're doing TV shows, you're doing feature films. I mean, that kind of solidifies things for you, right? You're kind of going, whoa, like, because I'm assuming that if you're not landing them, right, if you're not really having this success with it, it might deter you from even thinking about it as much, right?
I mean, I still have doubts every single day. Even when you do work, there's no guarantee that you'll ever work again, one. And sometimes you go 8, 9, 10, 18 months without working at all, in the commercial sense. You can always work on doing some other things, honing your craft, taking classes, doing stage stuff for not a lot of pay. But for the things that you can make a living off of, it can be a very long time in between gigs. So that's why I was lucky to be able to have worked in corporate for a little while and saved up that money. And that's the thing. I'm pretty fortunate in that sense, in that I'm able to not have to balance both things, because I did all that extra work on the front end in finance. Right. So it doesn't work out that way for probably 90% of the people out there who are trying to make a life in the arts. But if you love it and that's who you are, you make sacrifices or you make adjustments in your life to allow yourself to be able to do it. Because I mean, once you're an actor, man, there's no going back. There's no going back.
Yeah, that's you're right. You're more of a rare case. Most people you talk to, they go all in early.
They go exactly, and that was, I think, for me, that's what kept me in it. Especially during this time of the pandemic, a lot of my friends who are in and around the arts, they've had to pivot into something else because, especially in Chicago, all the stages are dark. A lot of the productions have shut down. There's not a lot of money to be made doing entertainment right now. But you still got to eat. You still got to pay the rent. And so I'm seeing my friends work part-time gigs or, drive Uber or whatever it is just to survive right now. So
go ahead.
I'm sure that once things pick back up, those same folks will be able to go back to doing what they loved. They'll be back on the stages. They'll be back to creating short films and writing. And the one thing I'm seeing, though, is a lot of those people, they're finding new outlets for their creativity. So social media has become huge in the last, it's been huge for the last few years, but TikTok in particular, I'm seeing a lot of my comedian friends just blow up there. They still have that same comedic voice, but their audiences are just so much bigger now. And so, they're finding that the same bits that they were able to do on stages in Chicago are playing for millions of people all around the world. And that's really exciting to me. That's not something I myself do as an artist because that's not the type of thing I do. But to see my friends do it. They're crushing it. And I'm so happy that they're showing their talents to the world, and the world is noticing it. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, humans are incredible things. You know, they can adapt. I mean, that's why we're still here, and that's why, you know, we run the world of all the beings, is because we adapt. And the pandemic has really showed, you know, who can and who can't. You know, you got some people who just sit at home all day, you know, eating hot Cheetos, drinking, and you know, using unemployment, and really not bettering themselves. You know, just kind of.
I mean, and I don't blame them. In this time period, just staying alive is an accomplishment. You know, it's like, just stay alive. Once this thing is over, then you can worry about bettering yourself. But right now, man, because I've had one friend who was in the comedy scene, and he took his own life a couple of months ago.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the other side of it too. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for pivoting and making your art known to a lot of people. But another thing is just keep your passion for life going. You know, just do whatever it takes. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your friends. Just stay alive, man, because this is hard for a lot of people. There are, you know, so many resources out there that are available to people, and this, I wish he would have reached out to one of them, you know. And
no, I completely agree with you in that aspect, and I think we're kind of saying the same thing. Like when I say, you know, bettering yourself, that's what I'm referring to, right? We have the resources. Just like me, for example, you know, I was in the service industry. That's dead right now. Lost my job. So, you know, right before the pandemic started, I found out that my girlfriend was pregnant. So, I mean, I can't just sit around and wait till this thing is over, right? I got a baby on the way, you know, I got her living with me. So I got 2 mouths to feed. So I didn't think that was an option. So I went and got a certification online and just shifted, you know. Now I work in IT, you know, and I think that's what I'm more referring to. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, I did my fair share of drinking. You know, let's not get it twisted. But I also realized that, you know, you can take advantage of what you got. I started working out a little bit more inside the house because I had the time. So I just figured, let's use our time, let's use our resources to better ourselves, you know. So you're at Loyola, you're doing some side gigs, but your main concentration is in business. You finish, get your degree. I'm assuming, don't know too much about Loyola, but I do believe they're pretty exceptional school when it comes to business, right? Yeah,
they're pretty well ranked. Program was good. Some of the best minds in the world I was exposed to there. It's pretty amazing. It seems like such a long time ago now, but when I was in it, yeah, it was incredible. And then when I graduated, I worked in finance and in corporate for a couple of years before the pivot to entertainment and acting. So
once you started working, I'm assuming you got a nice position because of where you came from. People wanted you. You started working. While you were working, were you still dabbling with?
While I was working, so that's when I had a little bit more time because I wasn't spending 12 hours a day in the library. I was working, 7 hours a day, maybe, not even. It's kind of a cush job. So I found myself with more time than I knew what to do with. So that's when I started exploring Chicago a little bit more. And the theater scene in Chicago is world class. They've got
Second City.
Second City,
right?
Yeah, the mecca of sketch comedy right there, sketch and improv. They also had the I.O. A lot of famous comedians came out of that. They've got the Annoyance Theater, and that's just the comedy side. As far as the straight theater side, there's hundreds of smaller theater companies out there, ranging anywhere from 20-seat theaters all the way up to 300-seat theaters. for stage stuff. So any single night of the week, you could go out and see a show, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money either. So with that extra time in my evenings and on weekends, I used that to kind of explore that community a little bit. I took classes in acting and comedy, and I started picking up gigs, working production on the other side of the camera, where we're working, making films and things like that too. So Chicago was rife to learn about entertainment at that time.
There's a difference between being on stage in front of a live audience and being on the set, right, with a director and people. What do you prefer and why?
I mean, there's it's like asking to choose between two of your kids. I mean, you love them both, but for different reasons. On stage, you get the audience is right there with you. You have this sense of immediacy, this intimate connection. Even though you're not even paying attention to them, you can feel the energy in the room. And it's just like you kind of, the rest of the world goes away, and you're in that moment with your scene partner or with the setting or the stage, or sometimes you engage directly with the audience, but nothing outside of that theater matters then. And that's such a lovely experience. And I think that's why so many people go to see live theater still. Just because it's an escape. It's a thing that makes your brain go, changes the way you think, gives you a point of view from what you know already in yourself. It gives you a different point of view from someone maybe who lived 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, or, in this country or that country. It's such a beautiful thing. That's stage. But then when you work on sets or around the cameras, it's like you love that too because of the timing, the teamwork. It takes so much collaboration to make a thing like that work. You know what I mean? You've got so many departments. And people who love what they do, love that everyone is there on set getting to do the thing that they love to do. And that's amazing. That's pretty amazing. And sometimes you get paid for it. Sometimes you don't. But I love them both. For me as an actor, though, I think acting on stage makes me feel more connected with life than anything else, I think. Mm. Because you kind of have to let your guard down. You don't have to worry about a lot of the technical aspects. And it's like, once the curtain goes up, nothing stops until curtain goes down. Whereas in the film side, it's very calculated. It's like clockwork. Sometimes there's a little bit of leeway in what you do, but it's stop and go all the time. It's like camera setup 1, camera setup 2. It's a little bit different animal. But when you get to experience either one of them, I'm sure you would fall in love with it.
You mentioned you doing classes, acting classes. I'm assuming there's just different. I guess it's different for individuals when it comes to that, right? Some people, they don't really do that. They I don't know what the natural approach or a different approach is. Is from your experience, like people you've worked with, which one is mostly the path people take? Is in general, do people usually take the classes, or?
In this world, there's no one path to get to, quote unquote success. Mm-hmm. There's a million different actors out there. There's a million different paths to get to where they are. It's not like the linear education system in America, where it's you go through kindergarten through 12, then you go to college, then you go to grad school, and then you go out in the world and you do the thing. There's so many different paths to becoming an entertainer in this world. I know people who did dinner theater. I know people who never took an acting class in their entire life, who are just good at knowing what it took to connect with audiences. There are people who are creating content on their phones, who are actors, who are entertainers, but their paths are so different, and that's what we're discovering now. It's become commodified who can create content. Back in the film days, film camera days, it's like it's the studio decision who goes in front of the camera.
Yeah.
These are our actors. These are our contracted actors. They're going to make so and so many films a year for us, and that's it. These days, people can make a whole feature-length film with a thing that they have in their pocket, which is incredible. And it's been becoming more and more like that ever since they started with digital cameras, because one of the things that was a barrier to entry for a lot of folks was the cost of making a film. Back then, thousands of dollars to even get the film stock to be able to record on, and then have the expertise to edit and all that stuff. These days, because everything is digital, you can afford to make mistakes. You can afford to experiment 1,000 times before you make the thing. You know what I mean? Whereas back then, you can't have 40 takes to get it right. Now you can do 80 takes, pick one or two that work, and that goes in the project. And so it was much more leveraged back then as far as what you could be able to do. So
no, you're absolutely right. I've started to dabble with it, and it's just amazing what you can do. I've always, ever since I was young, I've always wanted to act, direct, write, and finally being able to do that, in a couple of short films that I've done, I was just fortunate that like you said, the team that is involved. So what did I do? I just surrounded myself with talented people, So I remember we did this short film, and I was directing it, but it wasn't my equipment. Like these guys, with the 4K cameras and the boom mics and knowing about lighting. And I was like, okay, I want it to kind of look like this. I want this shot. And then I see it and I'm like, wow, like this is as good as going to the movie theater, man. Like this is crazy. And like you said, now that it's affordable, now that it's doable, I mean, it's like, screw Hollywood. I'm gonna just make it in my, and you're seeing that, right? You're seeing, and you add the fact that we have so many platforms now. You have Apple, you have Amazon, you have Netflix, and they need content. And that's not even including all the cable channels that still exist, all the local ABCs and CBSs. It's crazy. Like what they, now it's no longer about the studio, right? It's like you don't need the studio needs you. They need the content.
Yeah. And like Amazon Studios, they got a thing where they allow you to host your content on Amazon Prime Video. I don't know exactly how that works out, but I've had friends who put up, their feature-length films or their short films or even their stand-up comedy on Amazon Prime. But that's still even connected with the studio world. You could even do it because of the internet, host it on your own website.
Exactly.
Put it, or YouTube or Vimeo. You can host it virtually anywhere now. And there's so many digital film festivals now that you could submit to. The hardest part is always just getting the script. But once
dude, that is the hardest part, man.
Once you have that, you have a motivated producer and director, things will get going because there are crew people out there. There are lighting, sound folks, actors who will just say yes. You know what I mean? So it's up to the producers to find a good producible script that they can execute, and the director to get the right people around it, because the talent is out there, man. The talent is like the guy who's working at Subway or McDonald's. That guy went to film school, or that guy spends 3 hours a night watching YouTube videos about how to color video or edit. Or, you got people who are independently mixing their own soundtracks all the time. It's so easy. The hardest part is finding a good script. Once you get that, it's easy. I mean, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but when you get the script and then the logistics of getting people together, but once that's done, you just need a few motivated people to get the project done after that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. That
even though the women who made the show Broad City, it never started out on the Comedy Central. It was a thing that they did on their own. I think they hosted on YouTube or even on their own website. Once you create that content, though, studios will find you and they will buy your stuff, and they'll finance the next 2 or 3 seasons, and then your career's off and going. So
yeah, that's the goal, man. I gotta quit bullshitting. I got a couple of projects that I've been working on for going on 4 years, and every time I think I know what I want and I work on it, then I come to a point where I'm like, oh no, like that's not going to work, or this would be better. So then I do a rewrite and then another rewrite. So
my only suggestion is to go smaller even. I mean, people were making 7-second vines that told a story, beginning, middle, and end, and they had payoff. So there was a setup and a comedic payoff, or whatever it was, a dramatic payoff. But if they can do that in 7 seconds, imagine what you could do with a minute or a page of script. So if you're getting kind of caught up in how big a project could be, make a smaller one, and then make a slightly bigger one, and then by the time you'll feel so comfortable that there's nothing that can stop you from making that thing.
No, you're right. You're right.
The project you've been working on for 4 years.
Yeah, that's actually like a TV show, right? That's going to consist of like, you know, a season, obviously, but I think the most I've written is like 3 episodes. But you know, you're right. I'm doing a short film this summer. That's pretty much conceptually done. I just got to write the script, but I pretty much have it in my head of what I want to do. But no, you're right. I mean, start smaller, get comfortable, get that done, and then it'll help you out with the longer projects. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by The Ranch Houston, comprised of Ashe Yoga and Wellness, The Garden Project, and The Mill HTX, is an intentional, conscious organization created for adults to connect to an inclusive community through art, food, nature exploration, and movement, and for school-age children to empower themselves through education on sustainability and edible gardening. It is run by Tamika Caston-Miller and Lenny Caston-Miller. Highly recommend it. Y'all go get your stretch on, get your garden on, and just go out there and meet some good people and have a great time. We are also brought to you by Apparel Up, the leading custom apparel provider in Houston, Texas. They help customers represent their brand correctly with high-quality, long-lasting custom apparel. Whether you're in need of embroidered scrubs for your medical practice, embroidered polos for your nationwide enterprise, or screen-printed shirts for your sports team, they got you covered. They are dedicated to providing you the highest quality of screen printing and embroidery service, run by the very talented Jennifer Franco. Get your embroidery on from Apparel Up. So we finished Loyola. We're working. We're in the business world, corporate world, still doing the acting on the side. What happened when you just said, you know what, I'm done? Like, was there some type of breakthrough, or did that itch?
It was kind of like it was. I lost my youngest brother to suicide in the fall of 2014, and I was crushed, just like everyone in my family. But my brother Andy, he and I were so close, and I'd mentioned that I was so focused on school for those 3 or 4 years before that. It's just I lost touch with him, and when he died, I just went into a downward spiral for about 6 months. And I remember, towards the end of that 6 months, I remember him visiting me in Chicago. And one thing that we did together, we went to see a show at Second City. And I just remember it, and remember being in the audience, laughing, and looking over at him, seeing him laugh, and just enjoying ourselves. having the time of our lives. And at the end of that show, one of the actors said, "Hey, thank you for coming to Second City. We also have classes." And so, at that point in my grief and mourning, I remembered that. And I decided, I can't just cry on the sofa anymore. I got to reconnect with the world, reconnect with people. And so I took a class at Second City. And it just kind of started pulling me out of my shell a little bit, got me out of the house. I started meeting really kind, talented, passionate people. And the more I did it, the more I was reminded about Andy. He was such a very kind, passionate person, and he, the more I did that, the more I felt connected with him, even though he was gone. And so, and that's what led to it. That's when I decided, you know what, the only time I was ever really happy in my life was when I was on stage. And that was, almost 15 years prior to that in college. And so it'd been a long time. And between that feeling that I had for myself and then the feeling of connectedness with my brother, I'm like, I got to quit my day job and just do this. Because the other thing that I feel about the industry has always been there was never anyone who looked like me on the stages. There weren't very many Asian or Asian American people on film or on stage for me to look up to, especially when I was growing up. And so right. I'm like, maybe that's my calling. Maybe that's what my mission is. I know I already love it. I don't need to work the 9 to 5 really to afford the lifestyle I want, which is pretty basic. I don't buy a lot of things. I don't take a lot of trips very much anymore. And so I don't need that income, that level of income that I had before. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just do this for a while, see how it goes, see how it feels. It just felt amazing. And so that was, what year is this? That was like 6 years ago or something like that. So I've been doing this for 6 years now. So.
Yeah, man. I knew your brother Andy, and he was an awesome guy. I always had a smile on his face. I was very optimistic. Always very curious how you're doing. Like you said, very kind. And like you said, you were so focused on school, which obviously no one's going to say you shouldn't prioritize school, right? But at the end of the day, it wasn't really what made you really happy. And then you see something like this happen to your brother, which is, related to his happiness or lack thereof. And you realize like, hey, like this is something that I should kind of apply to my life. Like let me look at my life real quick, see what's going on with me. And it kind of gave you that catapult to say, let me focus on when was I the happiest? Oh, when I was doing this. Well, let me do that. And it's a great story how it helped you with how you were doing, and it also helped you kind of think about your brother and still bring you closer even after his death.
That previous lifestyle, it was always about my happiness was always about something that would happen in the future.
Right.
Okay, so I'll just buy a Porsche, or I'll get this swanky house on the hillside or something. That's what's going to make me happy. Whereas now, I try to focus on the happiness in the moment, which really, that's the kind of the biggest shift in thinking I can imagine for a lot of people is to not delay things, because you don't know how much time you have
right.
in this world, you know what I mean? And so planning, and it's helpful, but don't bank your entire sense of self on that. Try to see what's right there in front of your nose, and maybe that's all you need. Yeah,
it's definitely a balance, right? You hear people say, and I've said it, the more you sacrifice now, the greater the reward later. But to what end? Like, are you sacrificing so much that reward is not as rich, right? Or are you missing out on things now that can no longer be? You can't obtain those. Once that time passes, that's it. So, yeah, I think
yourself on your deathbed and thinking back over your life, you're not going to think about, oh man, I wish I worked more overtime hours.
Right.
Or I wish I would have landed that account, or I wish I would have did this. I wish I spent more time with my family, or I wish I would have asked this girl out, or married this girl, or gone out with that guy, or done this thing. It's always a lot more personal than those 5-year plans are. You know what I mean? When you look back, when you're on your deathbed and you look back, you probably would throw away that 5-year plan book and think about some of the things that were right there in front of you.
Yeah, I think probably the best approach is maybe to have long-term goals, but also to have those short-term goals.
Exactly. So it's kind of like what we were talking about before, having that overall view of the machine, but also the detail of kind of like your role. And if you think about your role as being that person living in that moment, that's your role. So focus on that. And then, but you can be aware of your family or your friends and your extended network. And 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's always within your consciousness. But most of your focus should go towards that moment,
I completely agree. So we get the inspiration at Second City, the offering the classes. So you start doing that. What other things were you just doing? So I'm assuming you were doing the Second City. You're still pursuing auditions. What kind of things did you have going on right when you decided to go full in on the acting? And
so I kept track of all of my performances. What year was it? 2018 or 2019? I think it was 2018. Every single time I had either an audition to prepare for, or a show, or a reading, or something like that, something entertainment business related, I wrote it down on a book. And by the end of that year, I had almost 300 incidences.
Wow.
So that's like almost a thing a day that I was doing. There were weeks where I was performing 5 or 6 nights a week. For long periods of time. And that's because in Chicago, they had a lot of improv theaters. So you could, if you wanted, you could go perform in 10 minutes. You hop on the train or the bus, you'll be at a stage, you sign up. Hey, let me do a set. And that's improv and that you could do. But there's also open mics for the stand-up folks. There's storytelling. There's poetry. There's you can get out and have an audience with almost anything. The only thing you needed to worry about was developing your voice as an artist. And it was, some of the audiences were just the most welcoming people. Man, you could go up there with some really experimental stuff. People would love it. And that would encourage the artist who was on stage to go out and create more. And that's the thing about Chicago, is it's such a nurturing place to come up, And then it was so much opportunity to do it.
I guess, I used to live in Chicago when I was younger, but I've been gone for a long time. But, living, looking from the outside, you hear a lot of things about Chicago, especially with the murders and the gang violence. I guess it just has to do with what part and what are you doing, right? I'm assuming you weren't venturing out into the hoods. You were just going
occasionally there were shows down on the south side, not as often, but there are small theaters, especially around the university there, University of Chicago. There's some theaters down there, but that's a thing that's an area of improvement. You're right that that community could bolster, is to bring more of the arts to that part of the community. And we're seeing it happen here and there. There's programs, even within Second City, there are programs to bring kids in or at the Annoyance Theater, they had a show there where they busted in a bunch of high school kids from South Chicago to see some of their shows, to expose them to that type of art and comedy and stuff, to show them a different reality of or a different realm of possibility to them. But there was always more to do. There's always more to do in that world. Huge amounts of the money in Chicago went to the predominantly white institutions, the North Side, the well-to-do, the affluent neighborhoods. It went there. But, the arts on the South Side is not non-existent. It's just, it could be more. It could be a lot more, actually.
And they're the ones that have those interesting stories, right? They're the ones that really have lived some crazy ass things, and it's a part like that most people aren't aware of, don't know what's going on. People that have had quote unquote normal lives. Some of the stories that they got to tell are just very fascinating, and it's one of those things where when you're an actor and you're asked to perform a certain scene where you're having to go through some grief or go through something kind of tough, some of these people have already gone through it. When you ask somebody to go through this, you're like, well, I've never gone through that. Let me see if I can figure it out. But some of these people, man, they've gone through everything. Like whatever you tell them to go through, I got that. I just got to remember that moment when I was 6 years old, and I can bring it out.
Yeah, that's the emotional memory stuff. But even if you're an actor, a well-trained actor who has never experienced that in their lives, because there's a lot of actors out there who've lived what you would say a privileged life. Mm-hmm. Where they never experienced gang violence or anything like that, or losing someone to not having health insurance, or
right.
It's up to the actor to identify what that is in a human being and kind of connect it to something that's not that, but something else in their life that they experienced, and kind of transmute it, because everyone has lived life. They have life experience to draw upon, and even it could be you experience it for the first time, It doesn't have to be an emotional memory. It could be like, okay, now imagine what it's like to lose your grandmother now, who's perfectly healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, imagine she died today. What would happen to you? And you could just do that and be real. It's all about turning up the parts that the script calls for in yourself, or turning down the other parts. Everybody has. I think anybody can play any role as long as it's like culturally appropriate. You just have to be able to not limit yourself to be like, oh, that's never happened to me, I can't do it. It's like, well, that's happened to a person before. I can imagine that this is how I would live that honestly. And that's the thing. You have to be honest with yourself and with the circumstance. You have to be like totally committed to that. You gotta drop down a lot of the barriers, the emotional barriers that you put up for yourself, or the experiential barriers. You get rid of that stuff, you can do anything, because you're a human being, and the script is showing. The screen or the stage is showing a human being going through this circumstance. You're a human being. You can do it.
So you've mentioned, you've done TV shows, feature films. You ever work with any people, or you ever been in a situation where you're just like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm doing a scene with this person, or I can't believe I'm on this show. Like, does that ever get to you?
It does, but then you just realize, oh, they're just another person who's had the opportunity to do this more than you have, and it's incredible. I mean, I might never be able to be on a set ever again. I don't know, but I've had some pretty incredible experiences, and you just have to accept that moment as the reality of the situation and go. Because I've worked with people who are really well known. I mean, they're nominated for stuff. They're like super famous actors, but like when they're on set, it's not like they're acting like, oh, I'm super famous.
Right.
They're there to do a job. They're there to serve the story, serve the character, and you gotta do that too. You can't be starstruck.
Intimidated. Yeah,
intimidated or starstruck, because you're there for a reason too. And you that's the thing. You just got to remember what that reason is. You remember that your role in that story, like we're talking about, awareness of the bigger picture, but also know what you are in that. And if you focus on that, it could be Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman or Brad Pitt or Keanu Reeves or whoever across from you, Meryl Streep or, Denzel Washington. Anyone could be there. As long as you focus on your thing and feed off of them, then you won't be starstruck. You can be starstruck when you're done, when they say cut. Then you can be like, oh my God, that was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. But until that cut, you gotta be in it. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. I'm a huge sports guy, and I've had, I've kind of fanned out meeting some sports people, but I would imagine that if I had to like play basketball with somebody who was a NBA player, the initial meeting of them would be kind of crazy. But once we started playing, like I would want to show them up. I could say, man, I scored on LeBron, or I stole the ball from LeBron. Like, that I guess it's how you look at it, how you analyze it. And like you said, you're both there to do the same thing. You have your role to play. And as long as you're focused on that, then everything else just kind of goes out the window, right?
And I think for a lot of those folks who are just so great at what they do, they've got this immense curiosity about life and about other people, that they're just as curious of you too. You know what I mean? So imagine them being starstruck by you, and you're on the same level all of a sudden. So.
Yeah, no, that's another thing. Like, especially when you start getting your work out there, you'd be surprised. You meet somebody like, hey man, like, this famous person, like, hey man, like, I like your work, and you're just like, what? You like my work? Like how? Yeah, you can't really just focus on that and give yourself more credit and know that you're there for a reason. Like, you didn't just walk in off the street.
Yeah, I mean, and work on your craft whenever you have the opportunity to do so, but don't judge yourself, or don't beat yourself up about not being able to do it, or don't judge a performance that you had. That's the other thing too. I mean, you have to learn in this industry. You have to be able to move on to the next thing pretty quick. You can't dwell on a bad performance or a bad audition. You kind of have to shake that off pretty quick and move on. It's always about moving forward. And sometimes it's not exactly straight. Sometimes it's in a circle, but you're always just moving. You can't, once you stop, that's it.
Now you mentioned stand-up. Did you get into that later on, or was that something you were always doing?
I love stand-up as an art, and I love people who do it, but I'm not a stand-up comedian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've done it for a couple of times, and it was fun, but the amount of work, and I just mentioned not judging yourself. I judge myself more in that than anything else, because one, it's written. You're the one who wrote it. You're the one who's performing it. So if it flies or bombs, it's all on you. And I just couldn't do that, especially with the schedule I was running back then. You have to dedicate so much of your time to writing good jokes that only you could tell. And that was hard. That was hard for me. For other people, they do it like breathing air or drinking water. And I'm in awe of those folks.
Now, let me ask you this. Growing up, were you a class clown? Were you that guy that was always making people laugh?
Yeah, I was a little bit of that. But that was more off of the cuff or in the moment type of thing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That's kind of like being witty versus being
right.
A writer funny. Just being quick-witted or smart alecky or whatever you want to call it. That was the type of thing that I did growing up, with my family or with my classmates or with my friends. Stand-up, there is some of that, but you have to be able to craft. You have to be able to put words together. You have to be able to work on your delivery, your voice. Yeah. Things that it took a lot more work than I was willing to give, especially at that point in my life. A lot of people have spent 10, 15 years honing their craft, doing this. And that, to me, when I got into it and discovered what it was, I'm like, I don't want to dedicate that much of my life to this.
And stand-up is an immediate feedback on how you're doing. I mean, you're doing a performance, a drama or whatever in a theater. You don't know if the audience likes it or not until the very end. You're doing a movie, you're shooting it. You're not going to find out until later if anyone likes it. But when you're doing stand-up, you know how you're doing immediately.
As soon as you finish your sentence, or even before you finish your punchline,
Yeah. And that's a tough pill to swallow if no one's laughing.
Yeah. But I've seen sets where no one laughed the entire set, but the comedian was up there still doing it. And that's what I really respect. I've seen some people go up on stage and just bomb like I can't even imagine, like in a dream, a nightmare, where you're dreaming and you're picturing the entire audience in their underwear and they're not laughing, but you still have to go. That happened. I saw it happen in real life. And the guy just kept on going like a baller. And then when he was done, he didn't run out of there. He didn't leave. He went back to the bar, got a drink, and then watched other people's sets. And that's when I'm like, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this, because if that guy can bomb that hard and him be able to brush it off that quickly, that takes a lot more discipline than I had in that art form at that moment. So
yeah, you do. I mean, and you hear comedians, big names, Chappelle, Rogan, Bill Burr. All these people bomb. They bomb, and to them, yeah, they don't like it, but it definitely makes them have to go back to the drawing board.
It's part.
It makes them better.
Process.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's part of their process. I mean, to be able to put a good 5 or 15 minutes together takes maybe a year, maybe more. I don't know. To put a whole hour-long special together.
Oh yeah,
that's a career. That's a career, man. That's 5-10 years before you get a call from HBO or Comedy Central or whatever. So it's like that's how much I respect it.
No, yeah, that's my next step, man. I got my little notebook where I got my my jokes in there, my bits, and my goal now is to get a good solid 5 minutes, just a nice 5-minute set, and go to the open mic and just probably start here locally in Houston, and then.
And the material is only a piece of the puzzle. You have to just discover what your persona is on stage. You have to discover timing.
Yeah.
You have to discover your voice, all sorts of different things that you're learning. And so I would say, don't even wait till you have 5 minutes. Just go up there. People go up there and they riff. They'll see something and they'll riff on that for 5, 10, 15 minutes. But they're working on something else in their art form while they're doing it. You know what I mean? There's always just getting up in front of an audience and speaking out loud. That does something to you inside.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I think what's helped me out is that I worked as a server for 3 or 4 years, and I used to my whole thing was each table that I had was my audience, and I always wanted to see if I could make them laugh. You know, I even had like just like little jokes that I would use all the time, or little lines, and obviously because people are different, they say different things. You gotta switch it up, and I just really enjoyed that. Like I'm not a shy person. I don't get nervous. I have no issues with speaking in front of a large audience. So, because that's a big deal, right? That's what most people have a problem with, is that stage fright. You get past that and get comfortable. Man, I mean, there's no telling what you can do. You know, obviously, yeah, you got to work on it. That's, like you said, that's the hardest part, is coming up with what to say and how to say it.
Yeah. Well, the thing you as the artist have to remember is that the audience is rooting for you. They want you to succeed. They want you to make them laugh. So do it. You know, It's not like they're waiting for you to fail when you go up there.
That's true.
You know, they're on your side until you say something that's off color, offensive. So that's the thing too. I think the hard part of comedy is trying to stay clean, especially in the first part of your career. But if you're able to do that, it becomes easier to get an audience. You know what I mean? Because your bookers can be like, it's easier to book people who are not blue, I think. And so if you're able to hone that part, then later on in your career, you can go as blue as you want because your audience already loves you. You know, you build up that goodwill.
Going blue, is that when you're like going blue is that being G-rated or not being G-rated?
Not being G-rated. So like the R-rated stuff, like the offensive stuff, maybe the stuff that borders on racial tension or things like that. If you can play in front of, like my favorite comedian is Jim Gaffigan.
Right.
You can put him up in front of a 7-year-old and he can do his material and it'd be funny. You know, you can put him up in front of anybody and he'd be funny. And so
like a Jerry Seinfeld.
Jerry Seinfeld too. I mean, he's clean, but because of his point of view, his stuff is more observational. It may not register,
right?
It may not read with different generations as they did with people around his age level. Whereas I think Jim Gaffigan, he transcends the generational gap too.
But you also have to do what you do.
Exactly. You have to develop your own voice, and that's the hard part. You know, it's a balancing act, especially at the beginning of a career, and that's why I'm saying is just get up on stage and you can work on a certain aspect. Maybe you work on 0 jokes. Maybe you just go up and you talk about news headlines that day, and then you talk about your unique viewpoint on them.
I'm gonna get up to this year, man. This year for sure. So let's just get the elephant in the room out the way. COVID, right? For somebody like you in the entertainment industry, how has this really affected you?
Man, right at the beginning of the shutdown last year, I was in a play. I was contracted for 2 more plays throughout the year. We had to close our play that we were in the middle of our run. We had 2 other shows canceled, and there hasn't been a successful live stage show in Chicago for over a year now. So all that stuff shut down. On the film side, everyone shut down too until they started realizing we've got a captive audience sitting at home. They need more content. They binge watch, 4 seasons of whatever it's been out there on Netflix or whatever it is. They're like dying for more. And so they were able to just put all their resources to building protocols that made it safer to film at this time, but it's still not opened up 100%. And even the productions that do open up, occasionally you read in the trades that they had to shut down because 1 or 2 COVID cases were detected or something like that. So we're not back to normal, even with all the precautions we were taking, even with all the vaccinated people out there. It's just going to take more time. The productions that are going, they're way safer about it. They keep on set. They only keep people who are essential to shooting. And even in between, I shot a pilot in November in Chicago, and even between scenes, when they said cut, we put our mask right back on. We put our masks and we put our face covering, our shields right back on, and we went into our actor chairs, and there was like inside individual tents. And
wow.
They were not kidding. There was hand sanitizer everywhere. And then we tested leading up to that shoot. I tested every other day for a week and a half. So I think I went 4 or 5 different COVID tests leading up to even being on set. So that's how careful they're trying to be, because there's so much money involved on failing. You know, if you have to shut down production for one day, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in some productions. So that's why they're willing to invest, because there's money to be made on the other side if you have something that's printable, you know, on the other side.
But you mentioned the shift, the pivot that some people are doing with the TikToks and social media. So have you started to move towards that as well?
I have not, because that's not the type of artist I am. I'm more of and that's why I love theater, because all I have to do is focus on the person in front of me, or the people in front of me, as far as my scene partners, and the audience I'm not really concerned about. Even though you can feel the energy that's coming off from those human beings that are occupying that space. But for me, it's all about that connection with my scene partner when I'm acting. Whereas some of my other friends, they want to connect with the audience directly. And the most direct way they can do it is via Twitter or TikTok or Instagram. And they're writing characters, doing they're writing quips, jokes on Twitter that are going viral. They're doing characters on Instagram. They're building followings of like millions of people, and that's all they need. They're so good at generating content that these types of audiences are craving. For me, I'm turning more inward. I'm continuing to work on my process internally. So I'm like doing other things. Right now, I spent the last year learning piano and guitar, and that's taught me something about acting too. And it's been incredible. The way I'm learning music now, it's like measure by measure. I work on one measure, I'll practice that measure for one whole day, even if I can't get it right. And so now when I go back to acting, I'll think about individual lines or individual movements or things like that, even with more rigor. I can't wait to get back on stage or on a set and kind of rededicate myself to that art. And that's the thing too. Once you're an actor, we mentioned this before, you're always going to be an actor because you look at the world through a different lens now. You know, I think you have more empathy for people because you kind of can imagine their circumstance or what their life is about now, because you're just more curious about it.
Right.
You know, and once you can put yourself in that person's shoes, all of a sudden you love that person, or you care more about that person than, whereas before you have all these barriers. You know, you don't want to get to know that person. All you see is kind of surface level stuff. You don't think about their lives or what happened to them that day or their family situation that led them to be like that in that moment. Now you think about all the other different variables in their lives. And so I think that makes you more empathetic when you're an actor.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So now you are in La La Land. You're in Los Angeles. What prompted you to make that move?
Well, we've been, my partner and I, she is from this area, and we've been talking about coming out here for many years now. It's just we've been so busy in Chicago. But now I think the time is right. I have an agent and a manager out here now. I'm starting to audition out here in addition to what I'm doing in Chicago. So it's good. Before I wasn't able to justify making that move and having to start from scratch. which is kind of what you have to do when you move to a new market, especially Los Angeles, which huge market. You got to learn so many different things, but the nature of the pandemic has made it so you can take a little bit more time easing yourself into it and not have to worry about gaining traction immediately, because no one has traction right now. So it's good timing in that sense.
So we mentioned goals earlier. What are some of your short-term goals or even long-term goals coming up for the next couple of years?
So short-term, I just want to act again. If that doesn't happen, I'm still going to be okay, because I'm learning music. I'm filling my heart and my brain that way. Longer term, I would love to start producing more. I've produced smaller projects, sketches, short films and stuff in Chicago for the screen formats. But I would like to be able to leverage both my business finance self with the entertainment self. And I think producing is a natural next step in that world.
Is that also including directing or just producing?
Yeah, so I've directed in the past, and I love that. But I think the finance side, the business, that lends itself even more to producing, I think.
Yeah, and you have a degree in it, so I mean,
I've actually got 3 degrees.
3 degrees. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, man, yeah, I mean, it's crazy how you've taken this pandemic, you've taken this situation that obviously was not good for your career, but you said, you know what, maybe it can be. Now it's an opportunity for me to move to LA, which we all know, is for America, that's like the film capital, so this could end up, leading to a chain reaction. Now you got, your agent and manager in LA, you're doing auditions over here. I mean, who knows, man? I could see you on a new show on Netflix or a new movie, this could be a complete game changer for you.
Yeah. I think one of the first things we said today was everyone's path is different. And I'm just happy to be on my path right now. You know what I mean? There's a million different paths in this industry, and I'm just on mine. So.
Exactly, man. Well, I mean, I'm glad you took the time and come on my podcast. I know you got things to do, now, I mean, especially, you're out in LA. I'm sure you probably got to work on the guitar, what was the other instrument? The piano, you said?
Piano, yeah.
Piano, yeah. So I appreciate it, man. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I hope your listeners find something, even one thing I said interesting, or something that we discussed as something helpful for their lives.
Yeah, and also, is there anything you want to promote? Anything people should go see?
Just be cool. Be cool out there. Yeah, be cool. Don't be racist. And if you see someone being racist, stand up for that person. So
yeah, punch them in the face.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all have a good one.